All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Grand Rounds, presented by this Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. As you can see, we're coming to you live today from the University of Washington campus. I guess we're always coming live, but today we're in a different location. Just wanted to point that out. As you can see, to my right here, I have Dr. Pellegrini. To his right, I have Dr. Unitzer. But before we get to introductions, I just want to say a little bit about our Grand Rounds. You may have heard the announcement when you logged on that we are recording this. So if you would like to see it again, we'll have this posted on our website sometime early next week. This presentation is sponsored by the Ripley Fund. So thank you to them. We will have an evaluation form ready at the end of this seminar. Once the webinar closes, you'll see a link. If you're interested in providing feedback for us, we would love to have it. Please take a minute or two to do that for us. Much appreciated. Our next Grand Rounds will be on February 28th, so a couple weeks off. So please plan to join us again. We will be back to an online format on the 28th. And we are going to try to leave around 10 minutes or so for questions at the end. So we have the Q&A feature activated. The chat feature is activated. So anytime you have a question throughout the presentation today, plug it in there to the Q&A and we'll go through those at the end. So with that, I think I'm going to toss it over to the chair of our department, Dr. Jürgen Unitzer, to introduce today's speaker.
Great. Well, thank you, Judd. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Psychiatry Grand Rounds. And today I have the great pleasure of introducing our speaker, Dr. Carlos Pellegrini. Now, as some of you know, Dr. Pellegrini is a surgeon. He's an internationally recognized expert in advanced techniques in GI surgery. In fact, he chaired our Department of Surgery here at UW for 23 years. And so you might be wondering, what the heck is a surgeon doing giving us grand rounds in psychiatry and behavioral sciences? So I will promise you that at the end of this presentation, you are going to see that a surgeon with the leadership experience, the wisdom, and the emotional intelligence that Dr. Pellegrini has a lot to teach us in psychiatry. So let me say a little bit about Dr. Pellegrini. Carlos spent his childhood in Argentina. He did his initial medical training there, and then he came to the US in the 1970s, and he was a faculty member at the University of Chicago and at UCSF before he came to join us here at UW as the chair of surgery. And here at UW, he not only chaired the Department of Surgery, but he was a tremendous advocate for professionalism, for professional development, for diversity, and for interdisciplinary teamwork. He also served as the first chief medical officer of UW Medicine until he retired a couple years ago. Carlos's work has had a tremendous national and international impact in professional organizations, in his field, in medicine more broadly, as an author of more than 400 peer-reviewed articles and books, and most recently as the chair of the board for the Joint Commission. But what I've invited to Dr. Pellegrini to talk about today is not his work as a surgeon, but his experience and his work as a mentor and a coach. After his retirement from the University of Washington, Dr. Pellegrini obtained additional training as a coach, and he now works as an executive coach and mentor for physicians and healthcare executives. In that work, he can draw on 4 decades of working as a mentor, a teacher, an advisor, and a trusted colleagues. And that's the work I've asked him to share with us today. And on a more personal note, Carlos is a great friend, a wonderful colleague, a wonderful inspiration to so many of us. So Carlos, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. And I really look forward to your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jürgen, and I hope I can honor your confidence that a surgeon can do this thing. It's a great pleasure to be here. Obviously, I have had a lot of relationships and a lot of work with the Department of Psychiatry, with Dr. Leith in the past, with Jürgen in the not too distant past, and I felt honored when I received an email from Jürgen and I'll show you the email on October 14th, 2024. He said, I am writing to invite you to present psychiatry and behavioral science grand rounds. Our faculty have asked me several times about an expert who could speak on the area of physician-clinician leadership and also in the concept of coaching. Note that he's asking me to do two completely different things in grand rounds, which is related to but distinct from the work we do as mental health professionals. You have tremendous expertise in this area, and it would be wonderful if you could share with our faculty. So I thought this was a great challenge, and I said, how do I prepare something that combines the two? And I have entitled this leadership, because he wanted me to talk about leadership and coaching for physicians, a path to excellence, because I think if there's something that joins the two, is that it is a path to, respect, and it's a path to excellence. I will start with leadership first, and then leave for the second part of the presentation a few remarks about coaching. So I'll give you here my personal view of leadership, and a lot of what I have here is not necessarily, well, some of it is obviously from the literature, but a lot of that is what I have seen, I have copied, and I have tried to emulate. I will define leadership and make it personal in a way that I think is different than most people think of leadership still today, even though leadership has been evolving over the last 15 years. And then I will discuss some ingredients that are essential for exercising leadership. And note that I use the word exercising leadership, not being leader, but exercising leadership. So defining it and making it personal. Let us start by killing the old mental image of the leader as a unique person born with a certain trait. That's when I was growing up, the way we saw leaders. And we saw leaders and leadership, something that was attached to authority, vested on somebody, let's say Jürgen, by the university to do something, and he was the leader, and everybody else was a follower. Leaders are individuals, in my opinion, that practice or exercise leadership, and we will see what leadership is and how to practice it. And I think it applies to all of you. And it applies to all of you in your personal life, as well as in your work life every single day, and as well as in your relationships with your friends and with everybody in your network. The Oxford Dictionary defines leadership as the art of motivating a group of people to act towards achieving a common goal. Okay? The leader is the person in the group who possesses the combination of personality and leadership skills that makes others want to follow that direction. And we will be looking at the goals, and we will be looking at the skills necessary to exercise leadership. More on that definition from the dictionary is the activity. And note that they talk about the activity, okay? Not the trait, not the DNA-related issues. This is the activity of leading a group of people for an organization, and I would say the ability to do it. Leadership involves establishing a clear vision, sharing that vision with others, and we'll be looking at those two aspects specifically in a minute, so that they will follow willingly, providing the information, knowledge, and methods to realize that vision. What does it mean, willingly? To me, in a very practical way, it means I want, not I have. I want to do this, not I have to do this. I want to come to work, not I have to come to work. I wrote this a while back in a paper, and then it got some traction, and a lot of people have quoted it. So I'll tell you that at that time I thought, and I keep thinking, it's a combination of some vision. And when you talk about vision, we will define it in a minute what vision is like and how it applies to every person, with the ability to influence ourselves. And this was the concept that others have thought was a little bit more original on my side, which was, I think that it is very important to have self-leadership, to look into your soul, to see what gives you meaning, what gives you purpose, what makes you live and then act in that, in a coherent way with that. And others by non-coercive means, because obviously it's easy to mandate in a certain environment at a given time and a set of circumstances. And I say that because the leadership, the practice of leadership changes with the times, with the circumstances, and with the environment. As a surgeon, if I was operating and I opened a vein and blood started coming all over the place, the kind of relationship that I have with the people on the team has to be a little bit different and more urgent. That's where the timing is important, the environment is important, and the circumstances than if a faculty member came to me and said, I need a few days off because I have an issue at home, where empathy, compassion, and a number of other issues come to play, and when you can negotiate something in a different way. So I want you to think of leadership, if I could ask for you to do that, as a way of living, as a way of acting every day, as a way of relating to other people, in a way, as a way to getting what you want, if you can influence other people, right? Getting your way, influencing a process, in essence, is an attitude. And you can say, is this really relevant to me? And I think it's important for a physician in the professional life, because Jürgen wanted me to talk about leadership in the confines of physician work. In your relationship with patients, you want to influence the patient to do something. And in your relationship with your colleagues, you want to sometimes make the colleagues take a different route, a different way of thinking. As you become leaders of divisions and departments, as you create a research team, or as you try to influence policy in healthcare. Both Dr. Vieth and Dr. Udenser have influenced the policy in healthcare tremendously in this state. And that's why there have been such a tremendous growth in the Department of Psychiatry and in the funding that the state and the nation provide for mental health care. So in almost every of those aspects, somebody had to influence others to do something they wanted. And that's what it is. And sometimes people say, oh, I am just one person, I can't do that, I have an environment around me. And I like to quote Helen Keller, who was blind at age 9, meaning that she had vision before age 9 and then she lost it. And she said, I'm only one, but still I'm one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something I can do, right? So I believe in the power of one. And you can influence a little bit, or you can have a larger circle of influence, or even a much larger circle of influence as some in this room have had. I like these two quotes from a book that Bruce Gewirtz wrote. He's a vascular surgeon, wrote a book called The Best Medicine, and it talks a lot primarily about emotional intelligence, but he said, discussing leadership is an intrinsic human asset, not a byproduct of a title or administrative appointment, which is something that I killed at the beginning of my talk. One's innate leadership abilities can be improved through thoughtful changes in attitude and behaviors. And this is a different concept than we had so far discussed, and a very important one. You can learn leadership, you can study leadership, you can study ways to influence other people. And so this is not a static problem that you are or you are not. And that's why I don't talk about being leaders, but actually exercising leadership, right? So what are those ingredients that we talked about? Well, we talked about in the definition that leaders have to create a vision, articulate a purpose, generate trust, and have a bias towards action. Those are the 4 things that we will discuss in the next few minutes. The first one is create a vision. And, when you start thinking about a vision, I would like to distinguish what I call the small vision versus the big vision. We're not talking here about a vision to treat all patients who have needs on mental health care in the state. We're talking sometimes about how do I get my kid to want to go to school? Not to have to, but to want to. How do I convince my husband that this is a better place to go work or whatever it is? So the vision is whatever you are trying to influence on other people, right? And that vision, in my opinion, has to have a significant component of morality, having meaning and significance. It has to be shared, meaning for the people that are involved in it, right? So this is when we practice empathy and when we try to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and say, what is this person going to react to if I say, I would like to have a trip to Paris for our next vacation? What are our finances from her point of view or his point of view, and not necessarily what I want, right? Delineate clear expectations for followers, and in so doing, mitigate risk to the greatest importance that you can, right? Now, I will need your help, IT, I think, because I'm not sure how to deal with that one. You do? Beautiful.
You guys said they got it, but.
Sorry? Oh, got it. All right, I got it. Perfect. So articulating a purpose. And here, if you have decided on what you want to do to influence the people around you, right? Then you have to be able to sell that to that person. And I know that selling doesn't quite sit well with the physicians, but I think that unless you express passionately or with some passion, right, the determination to achieve the goals of the vision, it's hard for the other person to get the attention that they need. Offer a strong point of view. Why going to Paris next week or next month or next vacation would be something good for them as well as good for you. Must be anchored in reality. If you have a lot of debt right now and if you have a lot of financial problems, that isn't going to work. So must be, and it has to act in a determination to achieve. And articulating the purpose has changed as the concept of leadership has changed. I'll show you 2 articles. One is, and before I do that, as you are articulating it, I think it's important to follow a principle of communication that says, when I intend to communicate something, am I communicating the right thing to the person that I'm going to communicate to, right? So you have an intent, and you know this better than I do because your brain has to compose the way in which you're going to articulate that intent. The brain encodes it, transmits it to the other side, and here's where most people forget. The transmission has to be received by another person who has to decode the message that they saw. If they just saw a smile on your face, or if they saw a laugh, it may mean something to you, but it may not be something to the other person because that decoding requires interpretation, which is based on the person's previous experience and life. So it may be that the interpretation equals the intent, and we're okay. But sometimes it doesn't. A joke that somebody may laugh at, somebody else may be offended by. So one has to remember when one starts a transmission of something that intent is not necessarily the same thing as the impact. And the impact is what's going to count when you're articulating the vision that you're articulating. And I said leadership has evolved because in the very past, or not the very past, but even 20 years ago, it was always mostly transactional because it was associated with an administrative title. So if you do this, you'll get an incentive, and I will do that for you. If you don't do this, the stick will come to you and you may lose your job or something of that nature. And the evolution has led us to be a more transformational type, where the leader wants to create purpose and meaning for the other person. So converting the I have to the I want to. And so some of the elements of leadership, of course, are now integrity, empathy, selflessness, humility, courage, collaboration. Nowhere here is authority or place in the hierarchical order of things, right? These are the elements. These were described from somebody in the military. I can't remember his name. Unfortunately, the person died shortly after he described this in one of the deployments. And it was recently replaced a little bit by even Gary Bernison, who is the CEO of Korn Ferry, he has a book called Take Control, it was published in 22, in which he talks about the attributes of modern leadership as being primarily curiosity. And he distinguishes curiosity as a replacement for judgment, right? I say something to you, and the first thing you think of is judging, oh, that's bad, that's good, I like it, I don't like it, etc. He thinks about it as curiosity. Tell me more about that. Where did you get that thought for? Go through the rabbit hole of exploration with somebody else may lead you to an understanding of somebody else's needs that is completely different, right? He talks about the context, the relationship with others, and the very important aspect of self-awareness, right? That is the basic step on emotional intelligence, to know what makes you tick, what triggers you. The second step, obviously, is to control that and to name your emotions and not let them just be the reaction to whatever you hear. And I wanted to show you two examples of how that evolution went from an article that was published in 1914 in the London Times, when Ernest Shackleton was recruiting for the Antarctica expedition. And this is verbatim was what it said: men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success, right? And he got a full crew. This was effective. He got more people than he actually needed. He had to reject some people. Compare that with a more modern way. And I took, this is in the back of the iPad that every pilot working for this company has to have. It says, serve from the heart, love what you do, improve something today, seek first to understand, deliver on commitments, make the most of what you have, keep calm, ask for help, make mistakes valuable, and have fun, right? So this is what purpose and meaning unto the leadership mean, as opposed to what we saw in the past, which worked in the past too. So we said the third aspect, you have the vision, you have the articulation of the vision, you have generational trust. And trust is the assured reliance on the character, ability, strength, or truth of something or someone, right? The person who puts the trust on you is going to be vulnerable. So creating trust is essential as a combination between the leader and the followers. The followers have to have complete trust on the leaders. So how do you generate trust? First of all, be the role model. Walk the walk and be consistent. If you want somebody else to show up on time, you show up on time all the time. Listen carefully to the followers. Listen with intention, meaning be curious, ask more questions. Communicate candidly and often. Act with reliability so that people know or can expect how you act. Encourage openness, even dissent, and express confidence in followers. Nothing will make the followers happier and more likely to follow you than if you don't, quote, delegate jobs to somebody else, but you empower them to do something because you have confidence on what their abilities are, right? So trust, I see it as a relationship, is like a keystone to an arch. It's essential for the integrity of the arch. You remember the keystone described by the Etruscans about 2,000 years ago was the key to this arch. And so when I saw this arch, I started thinking leadership is like an arch, but I have a different view of that one. I have this little funny view that I say the physician is on one side of the arch, the patient is on the other side of the arch, the physician himself, remember self-leadership is important, is on the other side, and the system, meaning the co-workers, the colleagues, the people that, the people like today in IT that make all of this happen with so much smoothness, and they're in the back. How do you create that? And I like that keystone that I have there in red, because to me, that represents trust. And that is the keystone that keeps the arch going. But the reason why I like this one better, and I created this just for fun, is because that stone is easy to dislodge. Unlike the one that I showed you before, And you can really ruin the relationship, and you can really eliminate the trust with just one action, one day, in one moment. And to restore the trust in the concept of leadership will require a ton of work afterwards to become believable again, right? So something to remember is that the heart is more important than the brain. Sorry to say that here, because this may be contrary to your thoughts. But what we're saying here is emotional intelligence is much more important than the cohesion, the intellectual cohesion when it comes to leadership. In leadership, people want to be listened to, understanding, share the time, help somebody else do something as a leader, and then give them the credit, right? Because people will forget everything except how you make them feel. And if you want followers that will continue to trust you, that is what you, in my opinion, have to do. And then the last part is action, right? Convert the purpose into action. And the only message that I want to leave you with the action is, you listen to the followers because they may have better ways than you to do it, but be comfortable with failure. If you fail to act because you are risk averse and you never take a move, you never make a move, as this basketball player said years ago, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. The other way around, you will fail. Hopefully you will fail rapidly and often and forward. And meaning, you learn from the failure, you get up and you move on with your life. And the last slide, I don't want you to read all of this, but it's the concept of agile leadership, which is a concept that just came up and is hot in the leadership talks and since last year. And what it is that the leader has to develop the ability to adapt herself or himself very rapidly to actions. You may have to be sometimes stubborn, and the next minute you have to be sweet and nice and understanding. You may have to be firm sometimes, and sometimes you may essentially be much more compassionate. The way between being graceful and being truthful when you are evaluating somebody, when you are talking to somebody, is a difficult way, but the mind has to go from one side to the other, and it's this concept of agile leadership. A couple of slides on impact of organizational leadership, because this is work that was done by Schoenfeld, who I know most of you know from the time he was here. I certainly think that Dr. Heath knew Schoenfeld. He started working at the University of Washington. He recently published a study in the Mayo Clinic in which he did something very interesting. He had everybody working for certain individuals in departments that were exercising a position of leadership mandated by authority, and evaluated them on what the followers saw as the leadership style of the person. And he got a certain score. And then they did a second study on seeing how many people in the followers developed burnout, had emotional exhaustion, had any other thing. And what they found was, in the issue of, for example, of emotional exhaustion, that the higher the score that the followers had given the leaders, the less amount of emotional exhaustion, which is a symptom of burnout, would exist. The less amount of depersonalization that it would exist. The more amount of, what am I seeing here? What is the bottom line? I can't.
Satisfaction.
Yeah. Satisfaction. The more amount of satisfaction with the department, and satisfaction with the entire department directly correlated with the leadership score that the followers had done. And I like this particular study because not only because it's modern, it was published last year, but it is a study that had two separate studies. One is, how do followers see the leader exercising all the attributes of leadership? They have 12 attributes of leadership for the score. And how do the followers feel in terms of their own emotional stuff? So let me stop here for a moment, not completely stopping, but this is the end of my leadership part. And I try to say what would be my take-home message from what I have said to you today. And I would say it's an activity. Leadership is an activity. It's not a trait that all can practice. And probably all should encourage to practice every day on their lives in every aspect of their life. It's not authority, but it's influence, it's ability to influence. And yes, if you have authority, you may be able to influence more forcefully, but this is willingness to do things. It's the creation of purpose and meaning. And essentially, it can be sort of put in steps into generating a vision, small vision, bigger vision, worldwide vision, and then articulating that in a way that resonates with the followers. And in order to do that, generate trust, which is, I think, the keystone, as I defined it a minute ago, of the relationship between those who are around you. And again, remember, I'm talking about your kids, your family members, or your faculty, or the people that are working around you in any way, right? And have a bias to action, remembering that action will necessarily have to have failure associated with it. So you have to develop a little bit of resilience to know, I am going to fail, but that's okay. That's part of learning, and I'm going to learn from my failures. Okay. So I try to make that in such a way that we can finish on time, and we are pretty much on time. So let me switch to the other grand rounds that he asked me.
Very efficient.
Because he said coaching. So coaching, and again, you will see through my thoughts here in coaching that this is in some ways aligned with leadership, and it's a path to excellence in life. So defining coaching, the definition that coaching has, in the coaching world, the International Coaching Federation is like, I guess for you, the American Board of Psychiatry, something like that, is our sort of guiding organization. There are 2 or 3 others, but this is the most important one. And they define coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. And, I like the definition, but I said it's too wordy, too difficult. I would not be able to remember. I will be frank to you. I copied that definition today, early this morning, when I was reviewing the slides from the International Coaching Federation website, because I said all of a sudden, Jesus, what does the International Coaching Federation say about leadership? And, I am one of their certified people, I should know. Well, I couldn't remember this, and it's too wordy for me. But it invokes a thought-provoking and creative process, right? So I said, if I'm going to tell this to psychologists and psychiatrists, they're going to say to me, how is it different from what we do? We do the same thing. We have a relationship. We try to change behavior on people, and how is that? And so I tell you what I tell people when I'm about to start the coaching, when I'm starting a relationship or an engagement with somebody, and I only do executive coaching, but I tell them, a coach is somebody that stands shoulder to shoulder with you as a partner. And there's a difference there, sorry. Let me go back there. As a partner, supporting the client to work on their goals. So first of all, the person that comes to me has to have goals. And every session we start with, what are the goals of this session today? So you got to tell me what you want to talk about, right? And that starts showing a little bit of a difference. Second is a partnership. This is equal. This is the same way. I'm not above, and I cannot be above. And you have to submit, we get examined all the time to renew our license. You have a Zoom recorded, and they look at it, and you cannot at any time act as if you are above the coaching. The person being coached is at the same level that you are. if the person says something crazy, and sometimes they have to say something, they say something crazy, people happen all your life. You sort of have to figure out quickly, how do you react so that your face, your body language doesn't, get there. I had somebody recently, I was talking to somebody and the person asked me a question. I said something about Winston Churchill. And this relatively middle-aged woman said, "Who was Winston Churchill?" And I said, "Oh my God." And I don't want to show anything, right? So how do you respond to that? I cannot tell you the answer because I'm your coach. I'm not your teacher. How do you respond to that question? And, there are numerous ways to do it, and you get trained when you're coaching. But the response that I had was, I am sure you're going to have tremendous interest in finding out who Winston Churchill was. I'll send you a link to a book today that I would say would fulfill your wishes and needs and so forth. So, defining coaching. Another definition, this is executive coaching. The executive coaching is, and there are different types of coaching, I'll show it to you in a minute. It's a professional development process where individuals, typically executives or high potential employees, work with a coach to enhance their leadership and management skills, improve performance, and achieve very specific goals. So we have very specific goals in it. They are all related to work, and they are all related to improving performance in the work, right? It's a formalized process with a set timeline, a collaborative process. We always talk about co-creation, where the coach helps the individual discover solutions through questioning and guidance. It is a process of curiosity prevailing over judgment, right? And remember what we said, the normal mind thinking is, this is good, this is bad, this is that. This is not about good or bad, this is about being curious and exploring. And if you do that right, most of the time people tend to have the sort of aha moment. Oh, I see where you're going. I see what you want me to do. I see something of that nature. Now, the coach does not directly advise or instruct. That is not coaching. Coach asks non-judgmental questions intended to help the client discover their own perspectives and solutions. Coach trusts their clients' innate wisdom. Coach encourages clients to draw upon intention, core values, and personal quirks. You follow the client, and if the client wants to do something, you let them do, because the coach, encourages clients to take steps that to harvest learning from missteps is part of the coaching process. So you have to sort of be careful. Of course, if somebody is walking into a precipice, you have a moral obligation at some point to try to stop him. I mean, you know much better than I do that part. But in general, the idea is let them pursue what they want to pursue. And you'll be surprised sometimes with the people that I coach, and I coach only executive leaders, the amount of times that I think at the very beginning, oh, this is going to be a mistake, ends up being a great thing. When you go through all the steps, and when they implement what they want to do, and they say, I'm going to take that risk, it ends up being something substantially valuable. So you become humble and you say, it's a good idea that I didn't say what I think you should do. These are the different types that are currently going on. Executive coaching in a one-on-one situation, which is primarily what I do. Executive group coaching, which other members of our company do, and they meet with people that want to enhance their team working skills and so forth. A new concept that emerged over the last 6-7 years is the peer coaching, particularly in medicine, and that took off maybe 3-4 years ago, where faculty members in medicine are taught the essentials of coaching in a very rapid way so that they can do peer coaching. They can apply the technique of coaching. It's just like applying and exercising leadership. We're talking about applying a little bit of the these principles to whatever else you are doing, right? And then there's other coaching focusing on specific skill development. If somebody wants to be coached in the operating room, or somebody wants in health or leadership or their own personal health, there are different types of coaching. So how it differs from other modalities, that address skills and behaviors. And you can say those modalities will be mentorship, teaching, sponsoring, psychotherapy. How is this different? And I would say there's a significant overlap in all of them. But just this morning, I found this particular slide and I said, maybe this is something that might be of help explaining the differences with the different modalities. In coaching, the most important thing is asking. It's very rarely telling, okay? In coaching, the most important thing is looking at what do you want to do? Where do you want to get? How do you think you're going to get there? How did you do it in the past to get to that point? And not necessarily the past or the things that have happened in the past, right? In consulting, you are asked to tell the people what they think with your expertise is good for that particular area. So there is a lot of telling, right? It's a lot of past thoughts about what has happened. In mentoring, you are telling people the mentor is somebody who cares deeply for somebody, who's going to try to help that person, who has a relationship that I sometimes tend to say is built on love and appreciation of other people. Much more coaching is much colder than that, in the sense that, you told me you want to become good at doing X. I'm trying to get you there to get that. Other aspects of your life are not necessarily part of the discussion here, right? And counseling obviously is very different. I recognize that there's a lot of overlap, but when I saw it this morning, I got it, I put it on the slide, and I want to let you know how good your IT people are. They had asked me to please send all my slides like a week earlier. I complied with that. I sent them a week earlier, and then 5 minutes before the talk, I sent them out and I said, "Can you change all the slides? I just got some ideas." Okay, now coaching and psychotherapy. I knew that you wanted to know what I thought of the differences between coaching and psychotherapy. And I confess that I went to ChatGPT and I said, ChatGPT, I am talking to a group of psychiatrists and psychologists, and they have asked me to define coaching versus psychotherapy. And GPT gave me essentially the whole thing. I modified a few little things here, but this is ChatGPT. It says, look how the differences are there. The primary goal of coaching, executive coaches, is enhanced performance, achieve professional goals, etc. Psychotherapy address mental health issues, well-being, personal growth. The focus in executive coaching is future-oriented, as we said before, right? Professional development, actionable strategies. Here, psychotherapy, past and present-oriented, address emotional and psychological challenges. The methods that we use is goal setting here primarily, feedback, accountability, behavioral techniques, psychotherapy, talk therapy, CBT that you are familiar with, psychodynamic, etc., etc. The outcomes for us is improved job performance, leadership effectiveness, achieving very specific goals. And psychotherapy improve mental health, emotional resilience, and interpersonal functioning. But ChatGPT goes even further, and they said, well, the scope in us is limited to professional and performance-related, issues. For you is broad, including mental health, trauma, relationships, self-esteem. And I must say that some of the self-esteem is also in here, but that's what I think may be differences. collaborative partnership here, co-creation. You tell them to tell you what they want to achieve that day, not the other way. You have a therapeutic relationship here, and these are quite different from each other. Unfortunately, we're not as well regulated. We have the ICF that I told you about, but and other organizations, you are obviously heavily regulated on what you can do and not do. And examples of topics: leadership skills, career distinction, work-life balance, team management. You work much with anxiety, depression, trauma, relationship conflicts, emotional regulation. Where there is an overlap, I think, is that both involve self-reflection, profound self-reflection. I never start a session with a client until I have received from the client at least one paragraph on what did the client take from the last session that we did. Because I want them to reflect through the week. What is it that you learned? What is it that we discussed? Where do you stand, etc. Both involve growth and an emphasis on creative, positive change, right? But executive coaching focuses on professional development, and psychotherapy addresses emotional, psychological well-being in a much broader way. So, in coaching, what we do is we start by assessing goals, determining the goals, establishing a coaching plan, then having regular sessions, then targeted skill development, whether it's communication, decision making, etc. We tend to get very narrow in our goal setting as we go through the exercise. Action and accountability. We always ask, what are you going to do? Okay, I want to do X. How much of that are you going to do this week? And we check on the next time, have you done that or not? Reflection and insight. And then we always have a closure and an evaluation of how the coaching engagement, usually 6 months or a year, worked around. Let me say that we should probably stop here. I just wanted to share with you this new study that was published last month on the use of peer-to-peer coaching in medicine specifically. And what the authors demonstrated is that it reduces stress and burnout in several randomized studies. This was a meta-analysis of the randomized studies. And I just wanted to show you that. Who might need coaching and when? Transitions in your life, new leaders, high potential employees. This is for executive coaching. Executive facing challenges, professionals in transition, leadership teams, individuals seeking personal development, performance improvement, succession planning. Some coaching engagements that I have are relatively short, no less than 6 months usually, and some go on for years, particularly with people at a very high level. And when I have tapped on them to ask them, what are you getting from this continuation? They have almost uniformly suggested that I have become a thought partner on the way that they are managing things, and that I provide them with a safe space where they can discuss any idea that they want, because there's no judgment associated with it on my side, and there is no, certainly a coach doesn't report to anybody, so we would never report back to anybody else. So, sorry, I don't know what I did, but I tap it again. Perfect. So this was the title. This is where we started. And I have tried to give you a little bit of at least my take in both the leadership and the coaching, as I thought I was asked to do. For some of you, this would be continuation of your mastery on what you're doing. For some of you, maybe a start. I hope that I have incited you to look a little bit further into it. These are things that can be learned, and these are things that can be useful. And remember, mastery, for those of you who are in it, is a journey that never ends. Thanks. And I was asked to give you 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I have 11 minutes left according to my watch.
All right. Thank you, Carlos. Fabulous presentation, making us think about what it is we do and how we can do it better. And what I am master. So thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna turn it back to Jed. Jed has been
Should I-
tracking on questions.
Yeah,
He's
so
gonna
we've
ask you
got
some
a
questions.
couple online questions here, so we'll start with those, but of course, anyone in the room can ask questions as well, and folks at home, if you want to type in more questions, please do so. So I'll just read this out loud so everyone online can hear it. So the first question is, so this audience member who says, I have observed executive leaders struggle with being a referee of their teams rather than a coach who's truly trying to lead people forward. So can you speak to that a little bit?
I think I have addressed that to some extent during the time that I was talking, and essentially, you know, we are evolving as the world moves forward all the time. From a time where the main job of individuals with an administrative title of any kind, in any aspect, in the military, in academics, in any place, was to be the person who recruited people and then evaluated the performance of people according to a certain job description, right? And things have evolved and changed. Now, some people are still stuck on the past and they won't change. And they are, if you are primarily a referee, if you are primarily an evaluator, you are primarily using judgment. So you're primarily using your values, comparing your values in terms of the job description of the employee being evaluated or the faculty member being evaluated against what you think it should be. But this is not being coached. A coach requires that both parties agree to begin with in what are the goals of the person being coached. And so there are times, if you are evaluating performance, that is not a time to be coaching in general. Although you can, as you are evaluating performance, use some of the principles of coaching. And you know, in a more modern evaluation of performance, that is being done. For example, instead of having, say, a person come in, let's say a faculty member and the division chief, and the division chief saying, I don't think you're doing the work that you're supposed to do. I want you to do X, Y, and Z. So for the next 6 months, I want you to focus on X, Y, and Z, right? In today's evaluation, people would rather, I think, people that are more advanced in the leadership style would rather say, first of all, self-evaluation. Tell me, how do you think you're doing? Many people at that time, in the situation that we just described, would start by saying, well, I don't think I'm doing that well, or I am having some problems, or I have not been able to do that. So then the next question is, what can I do to help you? Not telling you what to do, but what can I do to help you? You know what your job description is, right? I mean, in most instances. So then start going through the path of, okay, if this is what you want to do, have you thought about X? Have you thought about Y? Is this a better way to achieve that? Or when do you think you're going to achieve that? What will it take to get there? What have you done in the past to overcome these barriers? And so on and so forth. So the evaluation can have some coaching in it, but you know, in busy institutions, you have a performance evaluation time, 30 minutes, and you meet and you are a little bit more rigid in the way you describe it. I think it is a fantastic idea to use some of the principles of coaching, not all of them, during performance evaluation, and try to ask the other person, what are their goals? Now that you have worked here for 6 months, what do you want to do? Where are you going to go? Because you may find that they coincide with the ones that you had in your mind, right? So that would be my sort of explanation.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone in the room have any questions?
You talked directly and indirectly about the importance of listening. And I've read that most of us are horrible listeners, and like we start to formulate our response to somebody, halfway before they're ending what they're going to say. I'm just curious what your experience has been with in talking with your, working with your clients, their listening skills and how much important that has, what kind of importance that is.
I would be curious, what is your experience?
Well, I think all of us think we're better listeners than we are, including myself. That's my goal for this year, is to be a better listener. So, yeah, I think a lot of us, kind of are halfway there sometimes.
If you look at the literature, it says that doctors normally, and I'm not talking about psychiatry or psychology, I'm talking about physicians that are in the clinic, surgeons and so forth, listen for an average of 12 seconds to what somebody's saying, and then start preparing the response,
Right.
right? Now, notice I did it on purpose, but I wanted you to see the difference between me telling you what I thought in response to your question and me asking you a question that brought you much more into this. And I elicited from you, without asking you to do so, what is your style? And you said, I am not a good listener and I want to listen. So I am convinced that that methodology is a much better one than, because it brings you in, makes you a party to the discussion, and is likely to go in that direction. I did the same thing you did. It's a very bad listener. I am on the 12-second part. I'm a surgeon after all, so you can imagine that in the clinic, I would say, okay, well, where does it hurt? Okay, I see. Okay, let me see the X-ray. Oh, the X-ray shows X, Y, Z. Rather than the other part and listen. But as I learned this, I realized, I took a number of courses in philosophy before I did the coaching, but the importance in human connections and human relationships, the importance of listening intentionally. Intentional listening is, I'm curious about what you're saying. Tell me more about that. What else is there that I haven't heard? Reacting to what you're saying in a way that means I'm listening, not I am responding. And it starts with a sense of humbleness. I don't have the answers. Maybe you do. Maybe you do and you don't know you do. So, that's why listening intently, letting the other person completely finish, and then thinking, am I clear on the question? Is there a further follow-up on the question? When they ask me what are the 3 most important words that a coach says to a person who's being coached, the most used for me, tell me more. Tell me more about that. And it's amazing how much you can, well, you know that better than I do. If you ask them to tell you more about something, when they started telling you something and they stopped, right?
Other thoughts, questions here in the room? What about the ChatGPT response to how this is different from what we are teaching in psychotherapy? What do you all think?
It's incredible how helpful that is, actually. You can tweak it and modify it, but just as a way of starting conceptually putting something down, you can start to work with it. It's really
It makes it so much easier,
Yeah.
because I was thinking and I was writing
Yeah.
the slides, when I was making this presentation a week ago, and I was just thinking, what are the differences? And I started putting some things, and then I said, wait, let me go to ChatGPT. And in 1 second, it gave me that format.
Yeah.
But it gave it to me like 3 pages long.
Mm.
And I said, okay, this is probably not as good as it, but to me it's extraordinarily helpful.
Would anybody like to argue with what ChatGPT produced?
Mm.
What do you all think about that?
Well, I think you also said that there's definitely some overlap. There's definitely things that I think even a psychotherapist does, like in terms of growth, helping someone grow that I would assume a coach does as well. So I do think that I loved it. I loved how it sort of separated the two, but I do think that there are areas of overlap.
And we're biased, of course, and I thought the column on the psychotherapy elements was superficial. But again, we should be sophisticated more than that. But as a starting point, to make sure you don't forget something, then that's an interesting way to compare. What a helpful tool.
It would be great if anybody wants to challenge that and send me their thoughts about the table. I will correct it, not that I will be giving grand rounds like this on the near future, but the question is being asked to me many times when I'm in coaching circles. But they don't directly ask me, but the discussion is part of what's the difference between psychotherapy and coaching for individuals that maybe have an issue, have a problem, and want to explore what psychotherapy does. And you know, I think many years ago, when I was back in Argentina, I have discussed with you, I think I'm both, right? I was privileged enough. I was in a very difficult situation with political issues and with personal issues, and I had psychotherapy for the old-fashioned way where you lay down and you talk to somebody. The person who treated me was phenomenal, and when I was doing all my coaching studies, I kept thinking about her and the type of questions that she asked me. And she never gave me an answer for any of those. And I would get so upset. So, you know, I do think that there's, you know, maybe much more overlap than it is there. But what I asked ChatGPT to do was to give me the differences.
To teach them.
You modeled it really nicely with Becky. I mean, that's where you adopted more of a psychotherapy approach. You could have, as you said, it was a nice example, just answered her. But your modeling of inviting her to explain more, it's very, very customary.
And
you saw how it helped all of us because
Oh, yeah.
we learned two things about her. One is that she doesn't listen as much as she would like to, judged by her, not by anybody else. And second, that she is going to change. So, you know, if we were coaching, I would say, okay, next week, how much have you changed? Next week, have we done a 10% change, a 20% change, and so on and so forth? That would have been the coaching. But I'm not a psychologist or psychotherapist, so I don't know how you do it.
yeah, I mean, I think there is a whole range of psychotherapies that are from, you know, very non-directional. The experience you had never gave you an answer to, you know, much more action-oriented.
Yes.
So there's a whole range of, and you know, at different times you need different kinds of approaches,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I'm reminded of a little vignette of your action-oriented surgical approach that you alluded to. We were in the Columbia Tower waiting for some recruit we were doing come in, and we were trying to lower the curtains down because the sun was blinding us all. I'm looking at it, trying to figure it out. I says, I'm a surgeon. You just start pushing buttons. Take action. It was wonderful.
Well, I have been accused of having a more surgical approach when I'm not listening very much. I'm not sure that's fair. Several people have said to me over the years, why aren't you seem like you're more of a surgeon. You know, the idea is the psychiatrist will always listen. Right? Sometimes you have to, as you said, when it's bleeding, you have to say, okay, now we're gonna do this.
Yes.
Right? You have to have some capacity to modulate your style. I think you said that at the very beginning. So when that comes from an internist or a psychiatrist, I think, you know, being called a surgeon is not necessarily a compliment.
But you know, like in every field, I think that there are times, that's why in my definition, you said it's set for a certain
Yeah.
time and circumstances,
Yeah.
right? and they vary. And, you know, if your child is running into the street, you say, stop. You don't say, why are you doing that? So I think there's some virtue in that, and I would consider an honor to be called a surgeon, but
Very good.
I know that these things are different.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for being
Well,
here. That was
thank you.
excellent. So once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, everyone watching online, thank you for joining us, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Have a good weekend.